Good morning, everyone.
Uh,
How is everyone
Ooh,
this morning?
Good
aw,
morning.
Good morning, Mia. Good morning, Rodney. And good morning
hey,
to all our viewers out there. So far, we've got AC and Carrie with us, and I know we've got a few others joining us. You're watching the This Way Network.
yeah,
This is the chat session lineup, and we are thrilled to have one of our favorites back again, Mia Pyle from Pain Unwasted.
that's
Yes,
right.
if you don't know we love you by now, then we need to be telling you because we do.
I love being here. It's always an honor and a privilege. I'm so excited for our talk today.
Oh,
Yeah,
me
well, we're back again, and we had this right around the same time last year, and it's surviving the holidays. And so Mia's got some new tools that she wants to share for surviving the holidays, and it's always a stressful time. First of all, I think we all should just take a deep breath, relax, enjoy the holiday, enjoy the holiday for the break that it is. I don't think it's so much having to be everywhere, but I'm not going to steal the show because that's where Mia's going to come in. So, Mia, take it away.
Oh man, no, but I love you saying that, because I believe in there's some oldies, but some goodies when it comes to things we want to have in our holiday bag of wellness, right?
Right. Right.
And it makes me think about, I don't know if your families did this, but some people they would have the stockings, and inside of the stocking
Ooh.
they had different things inside that were for you. Some things were practical, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
socks and lotion, maybe
Oh,
toothbrush.
yeah.
I don't know. But then there were things you may have really wanted. Like, I don't know if there was a remote control to a car or I don't know, maybe some keys to a real car. I don't know how people do it out here, but
That's right.
I don't know about you, but there was always an orange in the toe of my stocking.
uh-huh.
Always an orange.
Hmm.
And of course the
Wow.
candy cane, right? You cannot have
That's right.
a
You had no
stocking
candy
without a candy cane,
without
the big
the
fat ones maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what I want to talk about today. Just if we can use that analogy of a Christmas stocking, we can think about our wellness package as that stocking, but we get to fill it with the things that we want. That are going to be helpful for us. We're living at a time where there's so much pressure, right?
Mm-hmm.
The political climate is becoming very toxic, if I can even say it that way. Maybe I should say it already is toxic. I don't know what you would say about that.
That's exactly what I would say.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, toxic, right? I was on my way home this morning, and one side of the street had these signs, and one side and the very other
Hmm.
side had these other signs, and there's just this sense of like division and pressure, and there's a lot that we want to do to take care of ourselves
That's
and to
right.
make sure that we are in the right mind frame or mindset as we navigate not only the holidays but the election
Mhm.
time that's coming up, right?
And a preparation into the new year. Boy,
Yes,
I look at the holidays as we close out. You think about what got accomplished in 2024,
right.
where the close calls were, maybe where the shortcomings were, but you start projecting into 2025, with a hopeful projection, God willing, and you're looking, thinking, okay, we got a new year coming, but to not carry all of the baggage from 2024, because what happened yesterday was yesterday. You can't, there's no need to carry it on. The best thing to say is, okay, I survived that or whatever, and keep looking forward with a positive outlook. Am I right?
Absolutely right. And I even want to add to that, Rodney, that we are still seeing the aftershocks of COVID, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
we still have to heal or
Hmm.
start the healing journey or be on the healing journey from the whole
Right.
COVID situation and all that meant to people, and there is
Hmm.
often in society, I feel, um, a move to just kind of let's act like that never happened. Let's just kind of move on.
Right.
Let's not even really. let's not talk about that anymore as though it was like a fad or something that it came and it went, but it was so much more impactful than a fad.
Yeah.
So,
I
That's right.
like to think of it like it was some really bad dream, and
mhm,
just wanna be awake now and
right,
not be in that dream anymore and not remember it anymore. That's what a lot
right.
of people are thinking.
Right, as
Mia,
though that were a healing mechanism, right? That I can just
mhm,
pretend and it will all go away.
Mhm.
Mia, sadly, so many elderly people and even young people passed away because of COVID. And it was a weird time. It was right around the holidays. And every time the holidays roll around, of course, we're going to love and miss our loved ones. And we're going to think about the parties and the times that we spent. How do you deal with that? Because so many people are going to, they're going to be like, wow, this is the first or the fifth or sixth Christmas without mom or grandma or whatever. What's a better outlook on things?
Okay, I'm so glad you said that. So this is so good. I've been doing a lot of reading and research in addition to like just my studies that I already have. And I just want to, for those who may be meeting me for the first time, I'm a mental health first aid instructor. So I'm not a therapist, but I do
Mhm.
train the everyday person and professional on how to recognize signs and symptoms of mental illness, how to respond appropriately. I do a lot of advocacy work, and I am also on my own mental health wellness journey because I got into this field because I personally had a mental health breakdown and I found myself in the
Mhm.
hospital and suicidal, yay, homicidal, and I needed tools. I'm also faith based. So I'm a Christian. I love God with all of my heart. That's how I identify. Um, and not to, push my views on anyone else, but I believe on this network, we really magnify God and then and his ways. And so I'm saying all that to say the thoughts that I want to share with people today come from those places,
Mhm.
right? And so
Okay.
they can kind of, figure out how they want to apply what is being said based on those things. One oldie but a goodie that we're going to add to it is remembering with more joy than pain. And I wish I could say that I coined that phrase. I did not. And hopefully, before the end of the show, I can give you the name. David Kessler. That's his name. David Kessler, Dr. David Kessler. He's an amazing person. He talks a lot about surviving grief, surviving the holidays as well. He's a great person to check out and to read about. But I love that he has that phrase, remembering with more joy than pain. And he actually co authored some work with Kubler Ross, Dr. Kubler Ross, and I'm
Mhm.
forgetting her first name right now. That's a shame. But they talked about the stages of grief, and a lot of research has come out showing that, well, yes, there are stages of grief, but everyone doesn't go through them all at the same time, and everyone may not go through them at all in that way, in that order, or all of them, and that's totally
Mhm.
fine. And so the one tool I want to share with people when we think about the holidays is we want to remember that, the holidays isn't a happy time for everyone, right?
Right.
There are people around us that are struggling immensely and
Mhm.
they are thinking about whether or not they even want to be here. It's
Mm.
very hard for them to imagine going through these holidays right now without their loved one. We have really close people to us who actually just lost their loved one last week. And so now,
Mm.
whereas they were preparing for the holidays, they're preparing for that. And so when we think about the idea of remembering with more joy than pain, the idea is number one, to remember, right? So whether you've been, if you're new on the journey of grief, or you've been on this journey for a long time, maybe even since your childhood, a tool would be learning how can I, one, remember, because it's okay to remember and not pretend that that person never existed, to pretend that I no longer had an attachment to that person, to pretend that the deep intense attachment that we had does not exist. Thank you, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Thank you for putting that up there. It's so good. Thank you. So I think that's really important. There is research in neurobiology, and I'm not going to get into neurobiology in depth, but I was listening to a really beautiful seminar lecture, and they were talking about people who are struggling with grief, and often their grief becomes complicated and it turns into depression, because depression and grief are two different things, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't have to. They said that often it's because we're fighting to not attach which our brains are trying to figure out this new normal, basically.
Mhm.
And whereas we're used to seeing that person in a particular way, like I
Mhm.
see you come home every day, or I know I can call you. My mind knows that I can get to you, and I know where you are in time and in space. When a person dies or is no longer with us, all of that is disruptive to our conscious, right? To our psyche, to our brains. And we have to learn how to, remembering with more joy than pain, still very much hold on to the attachment of the person while going through the practice or the process of allowing ourselves to realize that, hey, what I usually expect of this person, or what I expect, how I expect to engage with this person, has changed.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think
Mm-hmm.
about what I'm saying on that? I love to hear what you all would say about that. I hope it's coming clearly through.
Oh, yeah, for me it is. I'm tearing up because I remember those feelings. Sorry, I'm gonna
Mhm.
have a hard time talking now.
Mhm.
I remember those feelings after my son died, um, because most of his life revolved around keeping
Mm-hmm.
him alive, keeping him healthy. He was born with a liver disease, and we knew from the time he was 6 weeks old that he was gonna need a transplant to survive. So you're constantly living in that state of uncertainty. Will he get it? Will he not? Well, what's gonna happen? And never knowing if you did get the call, what's gonna happen then, what's gonna happen to your other kids,
Right.
um, all of that. But then after he died, thank you, Carrie, for that. Then after he died, I remember one of my first thoughts was after I got home and I was with my other two boys, and I thought, wow, we're going to have to redefine normal because
Mhm.
he's
Mm-hmm.
almost everything we did was revolved around giving him medicine, making sure he got to appointments, et cetera. And now all of a sudden there was none of that. We didn't have to do any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Just recognizing it's going to have to be totally different now. And then, as you were saying, the part of it, I think, is that feeling of everything here is so familiar, and my loved one used to be in it. And that was
Mm-hmm.
part of the familiarity. And
Right.
now there's all this familiarity around me. I'm in my own home, I'm with the other family members, etc. And I still have that feeling like any moment they're going to walk around the corner.
Mhm.
Right.
You
Right.
Yes.
know? So you
Mhm.
realize your brain is doing this. It's expecting certain things, and yet they're not coming. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that,
Mm-hmm.
because when you share, it resonates with all of us, and I'm so grateful that we can talk about it, because
Mm-hmm.
that is a huge tool as well. We're remembering with more joy than pain by, number one, remembering. And one of
Mm-hmm.
those things is being able to still talk about that person, and to talk
Right.
about them with joy, or even sorrow,
Right.
whatever we need to say about how we feel about that person or that situation that is no longer present, being
Mm-hmm.
able to speak to it and be free. And so, tool number two would be
Mm-hmm.
finding safe people that you can do that with during the
Right.
holidays, and being able to have like a check-in, because it's so great to have community, and to have people that get you and understand you, or get
Mm-hmm.
where you're coming from, even if they're not as intimate as you would like, some of us have friends that we can call, but some of us, our intimate group may need to be grief share, right? Where we
mhm,
connect with the grief share community, and know they're not our cousins or our family members, but they're people who are walking through grief and they want to heal. And
mhm.
so we can connect to things like that and be able to share our experiences, whatever it was.
And, you
Mia,
know,
Mia, I had a question, if I can. I know it's really a tough time because a lot of times when people pass away, you have those familiarity things. There are certain things. There might be a favorite coffee mug that the person used to drink out of or whatever. At what point should a person say that they have to kind of move on and kind of release that person to heaven, and just to release that person on? Because a lot of times I know a guy in Santa Monica, California. His mom passed away. I'm talking about years ago. I'm talking about 10, 15 years ago. And he left her bedroom just the way it was. I mean, he didn't touch nothing. I mean, and I that for me, I thought, like, I understand, but that's a big burden to carry. And should a person kind of, and it's not it's not about erasing anything. It's not about erasing the person or whatever, but how should people kind of wean themselves into the reality that the person is gone and how they can move forward? What is a suggestion for that?
That is an excellent question, and I'm so glad that you asked that. And I'm going to give some controversial answers that
Okay.
people may not want to agree with me on. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So first, when I think about from the standpoint that I come into the picture as mental first
Like a
aid
lot.
instructor, we
Mm-hmm.
always think about impact. And so as you're listening to this, for those of you who have loved ones who you might be concerned about, are they in complicated grief, or are they really doing okay? Then we think about impact, right? So is this person able to still show up for their daily life? Are they
Mm-hmm.
still able to be engaged in reality? Is this person able to take care of themselves, right? Show up for the things that they need to, or are they doing something different from what you're used to, and it's causing harm, or it's causing illness, or it's causing negative impact
Mm-hmm.
around them?
Mm-hmm.
Because my honest answer would be, well, who says you have to let them go? If
Okay.
that, and the reason I say that is because we already, death happens to all,
That's right.
and the act of laying that person from our sight is already happened. But who says we have to let them go in the way of, taking their stuff away from the room, or resetting
Mm.
everything, or getting rid of things, because that
Mm.
proves I've moved on? Because there was a story that I saw, and this was a TED talk actually, and the
Mm-hmm.
lady said, she would go to her husband's grave, she'd sit out there with a lawn chair and his
Yeah.
favorite mug, and she didn't believe in talking to the dead, and I honestly don't either, but she didn't believe in that, but she would just sit out there because it made her feel comfortable. Well, her
Okay.
friends got really concerned about this, and they decided to hide the lawn chair, hide the mug, take it away, because they
Mm-mm.
wanted her to get better, and it actually made it worse, you see? And
Right.
so this lady was still able to show up for her life before they made those moves. Like, she was still going to work, she was still eating, she was still coherent, she could take care of herself, but that just made her feel close to her loved one, to
Mm-hmm.
be able to go and sit out there with their mug, and that was just how she was processing it. And to me, that is totally fine, because it's not causing you illness. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if while she's doing that, she's also becoming very sick, right?
Mm-mm.
Like, she's
Mm-hmm.
starting to feel, we start thinking about things like hallucinations, and we start thinking about, this person is speaking oddly,
Mm-hmm.
they're having oddities in their speech, or they
Mm-hmm.
are not able to, well, I said it already, really, just, they're not showing up for their life in the way that would be helpful and expected of them, you
Mia,
know.
I want to jump in real quick.
Mhm.
So sometimes family members make the mistake of saying, well, I'm going to help this person, and they're not qualified to help that person. and they start doing things like you explained. They took that lady's lawn chair away. Should they have talked to a professional like you and had someone else who is not part of the family or that circle intervene and give better advice? Because I think that sometimes people try to help and they make mistakes because they don't know what they're doing and they don't know the impacts, like you said, of what their actions could be. Should they consult a professional like you before moving into stuff like that?
Man, that's so great. I'm glad you asked that. I believe talking to a professional is always great, right? Talking to a
Okay.
professional is always wonderful. Being able to dial into a therapist. I told you I want to have a shirt made that says therapy, yes. Like everybody, your mom, your dad, your cat, if it could go. Let everybody go to therapy because
Yeah.
we just don't know how much toxicity that our brains have absorbed that we may not even realize we're operating in. And that's even therapists go to therapists, you know? So absolutely, I think it's always good to, but you know what but as a person who may not have a connection to a therapist, if I had a family member that was engaged in that type of situation and I was concerned, then the
Mm-hmm.
first thing that we do, and this is just a little, mental health first aid tip here. Number one, we always want to assess for risk
Mm-hmm.
of suicide or harm, right?
Right.
And so the way
Right.
you can assess, just like they do at a hospital, you ask questions. Right. And so if you have a family member that is experiencing anything that you're really concerned about, you're going to assess for risk of suicide or harm. And that doesn't sound like, hey, are you suicidal? Are you going to kill yourself? It's not like that. But
No.
it's asking questions like, how are you doing? I've noticed that you're doing this. I've noticed that you go to the graveyard every day and you're there for hours. And I'm concerned and I just want to know, how's it going? How are you feeling? And we can understand. And then L, we want to listen without judgment. That's the next letter. It's a mnemonic called ALGE, ALGEE, right? ALGEE. So we're assessing by asking questions, and we're
Mm-hmm.
L, we're listening to what they have to say without judgment, so that we
Mm-hmm.
are, so judgment would sound like this: I think there's something wrong with you. I think you're going crazy. Versus
Boy.
I want to know, I'm curious about why you're doing this. Do you mind sharing with me why you're doing this? How does this make you feel? And then we listen. And then G, give reassurance and information, right? We want to give them reassurance that I'm just so glad you told me. Wow, thank you
Mm-hmm.
for sharing with me what you're experiencing, what you're going through, because that person may open up, and that's what they actually probably need, is to open up about how they're
Mm-hmm.
feeling. And then the next E, which you've been talking about it, Rodney, E is encourage appropriate professional help, right? And we can get that in different
Mm-hmm.
ways. Some of us, maybe our insurance, we don't have it. And so there are lots of times free therapy out there that people aren't aware of. There's support groups, there are grief share. I don't believe people charge for grief share, at least here in the city I'm in. So, is that true? Nina, do you know about that?
Well, I know I've been in grief share a couple of times, and the only thing that they asked money for was the book
Right.
we were using, which was about $15, very affordable.
So you're
Uh,
going to
and
pay that
honest
to
to
eat
goodness,
today.
yeah, honest to goodness, I also noticed that because the person running ours was um, a chaplain with a
Mhm.
hospice facility.
Right.
And so he sees this a lot. He
Yeah.
understands what people are going through. And he got a grant from somewhere so that if you could pay for your book, fine. But if you couldn't, he'd give you one anyway.
Oh, see, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. And then the last E is encourage self-help strategies, right? And so, whereas the first E was, I'm going to encourage that person, hey, I'm so glad you told me. Have you considered talking to someone about this, a professional that can just make sure, you're all is well or will continue to be well, or you could use some extra support. And then self-help strategies are a lot of times things that we can just do on our own, like going for a walk,
Mm-hmm.
eating some really good food, a really great book that maybe talking about what we're dealing with,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's algae. So those are things that I would do if I did have someone in that situation, Rodney.
I love that
Wonderful.
great advice, because I think all of us wonder when we think we're seeing a family member struggling, and all of us want to be helpful, but most of the time we don't know what to do. And there is a big difference between pressure and support. The
Yes.
people who
Mhm.
were, said, "Oh, we want our friend we think this is not healthy for her to be visiting the cemetery and sitting in a lawn chair for an hour, every so often and doing this. So we're going to take away the chair, thinking that
Mhm.
for now she can't go do it." That's
Right.
pressure. That's not support.
Yes.
So, and you all know how we all react to pressure. We tend to push back.
Absolutely.
Right.
Like
Absolutely.
that pressure. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we're not helping people when we do things like that.
And I want to just bring up back the neurobiology part about attachment, right? And so it's actually very healthy for our brains to have healthy attachments to people and to not feel that just because the person is no longer here, no longer with us, I
Mhm.
can't be attached to them anymore. There are different
Mhm.
ways that we can help in a healthy way foster attachment while also releasing the fact that that person is no longer here. So if
Right.
our attachment becomes something where it's like I'm not accepting that you're not here, right? I'm in
Mhm.
denial and I won't let that go. Now it's getting complicated, right? Whereas
Mhm.
I can still be attached to that cup that you always drunk out of. I can acknowledge this is your cup. I can talk about this being your cup. And this is going to sound very controversial as well, but in the lecture, he spoke about a person, he was a brilliant mind, Nobel Peace Prize winner, and that person would still write letters every now and then to his wife who had died very young due to tuberculosis, right? And he would write letters to her about, I miss that we can't play checkers together, and your ideas were always so good. I'm doing this right now and I wish I could talk to you and hear from you, but I know I can't, you know? And so that's really loaded because in it there goes the brain having that attachment relief, right, of knowing like, I am still connected to this person and this is why this person means a lot to me. However, I'm also acknowledging that you are no longer here, and being able to grieve that is okay. Like, in our culture we're afraid of tears and being sad as though it's a sign of weakness, but it's not.
Me, a quick question. Is it okay? And I think these are wonderful, or celebrations of life, when you can really celebrate a person, and you really, you include them. If I've seen people who've had holiday dinners and they'll leave a plate for that
Mhm,
person,
mhm.
and it's always, everybody can acknowledge that person and say, hey, mom, she's not here or whatever, but mom, we acknowledge you or whatever. And to have a little celebration, to always remember that favorite dish or whatever she prepared. And I think that also makes it a lot lighter and kind of takes away some of the pain. Am I
I think
right?
it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful, and I've seen it. And of course, definitely having that professional to walk with you if you're concerned for yourself is helpful because they may ask you questions and find, hey, you are attaching in an unhealthy way to this loss, right? But
Hmm.
for the sake of our conversation, I believe that's very beautiful. I remember I went to a wedding last year in the summer, and they had put a table for loved ones that had passed away during COVID, but that were not, they would have been there at the wedding, but they weren't. So at the reception, I should say, they had a table and it was specially made and no one sat at that table. And they had a little name card for each of those people. And they even mentioned them and they did a little thing where they brought flowers to the table, and that's at a wedding. And so you would have thought that people would have been crying or this is a wedding, it's supposed to be a happy day, but it felt so honoring, like
Yeah.
it wasn't
Wow.
long, it wasn't, drawn out, it was just a little, and it felt good. It felt so good to me as a participant that they were acknowledged even though I didn't know those people personally. it felt
Wow.
good to hear the people call their names and acknowledge
Hmm.
them, and to hold space for them in their wedding at that moment. And they were
Hmm.
significant people like grandparents and like the father of the groom, he
Hmm.
was there. And so it just felt so, it felt like a hug. And of course, there was some
Right.
tears, but
Sure.
and then they moved on with music and laughing, and they kept on with the wedding, and it felt really good to me. It was awesome.
I was at an American Legion here in Southern California, and I did not know. And I walked in and I saw a table, and that was for the POW. And I mean,
Mhm.
I looked at this table and everyone was eating, and I was like, "Oh, that must be some important person."
Right.
And the moment I looked, I walked over, and there was a tag there, and I nearly burst into tears. I saw
Right.
this, I was like, "Oh my God, they left the table." And I turned to this guy. I said, "Is that real?" He goes, "Oh, that's." I mean, when he looked at me, he goes, "Oh, that's very real." And
Mhm.
when I saw that, I was like, "Wow."
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it really brought to me all of the POWs out
Yes.
there.
Yes.
And I saw that, and I was just like, I asked him, I said, "Can I take a picture?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, you can, And I mean, I took a picture of that, and I never forgot that impact, of seeing that, and you think about all of the families and the people who lost people and, and prisoners of war. And when I saw that, I was like, wow. So it's that similar thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, and I know it's controversial, as Christians, we differ in our
Right.
beliefs as much as our faces differ, right? And so, there are people who will say, well, if my loved one's in heaven, there's no need for me to do that, or some
Mhm.
people don't believe that their loved ones are in heaven, that they're, in somewhere else. And so it can be really controversial, but I believe that the idea of remembering with more joy than pain is more
Mhm.
about the person as you knew them, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
being okay that in this present moment they're not here, but my love for them is still here. My
Right.
my
And
joy about the fact that I knew them and who they were and how they were, that
mhm.
love has not changed. That love is not gone.
And
What
also
they meant to me is not over just because I don't have them with me. And I can
also
acknowledge that, and that is fine.
and because we're here on the chat session, and of course we do have our Christian views,
Right.
I want to say, I think that we need to remind people, and I'm telling you, I've seen it. We all have seen it. We've seen people live their life like a bandit, and I mean, they've been people who just lived a life of just a rough life, and they never acknowledge God. But the God that we serve, I can say this happily, that some people, they might go into depression because they know that person lived their life like a bandit all the way to the end, fighting, kicking. I mean, there have been people kicking and screaming in bed. I mean, just rough at the last moment. But we serve a God that in the last second, if you just say, "Father, forgive me,"
Mhm.
and people, and you never know. So we should also
Mhm.
press upon people. Always remember, you don't know where that person ended up. So there's no need to carry, yes, everybody knows people and they know what type of life they led and what type of rough things that they did and said to people. But at the last second, if they decided to give their life to the Lord, they can. And I
And this
think
is
that
so controversial. And I love what you're saying. And I honestly believe that personally as well.
right,
And I
right.
also believe that it's not something I believe God even wants us to worry about, like,
Mm, mm.
because there's nothing that we can do. Our worry about where they
Someone
are,
else.
what they're doing, it won't change anything
Mhm.
actually. And it won't be helpful to us either. I mean, in the work that I do, unfortunately, but as a blessing to me, I've been able to work with families who have lost loved ones to suicide, right?
Mhm.
So that's a heavy question for families because historically people have always been told, well, that person died by suicide, they're going to hell, and that's just
Right.
what people will say. But I'm so glad that that's not the prevailing thought, right?
Right.
That
That's
that
right.
the prevailing thought is it's better to have hope, and that's
Mhm.
it,
Mhm.
because and the scripture says that it says hope makes not ashamed, and so
That's right.
and I believe that's another tool, if I may just throw that in there, right?
Mhm.
Another tool, or tool number 3, would be having hope, having hope, being able to plug into hope no matter
Mhm.
what, because hope gives you energy, it gives you motivation, it gives you
Mhm.
peace to have hope, and to leave that in the hands of a God who loves any and everyone and understands. And even if you didn't have any evidence that that person will be where you would hope they would be, you don't
Right.
have to worry about that, because God, who knows the hearts, he knows why people live like bandits.
Mhm.
He
Right.
understands way, you know, and He's gracious and merciful and long suffering and
Mhm.
caring and just.
Mhm.
He is
Mhm.
also just as well. In addition to all the grace and mercy, He is also just, which means He will do what is best,
Mhm.
whatever that is. And so we can trust that and that it that and leave it there, you know?
Yes, and we can trust that his heart toward them
Yes.
is even greater than ours.
Yes.
He's not sitting there, "Well, sorry, they did this at the last moment," or or they live
Yeah.
like that, and, uh,
Yeah.
so, hammer down. No,
Mhm.
just as we have been longing for them and we long for seeing them in heaven, God so much more does.
Absolutely.
His love for
Absolutely.
them is so much greater than ours is.
And
So
so that leads me, that's so beautiful, Nina, that you said that. And that leads me into probably number 4, which is an oldie but a goodie, and that is boundaries. And I bring up boundaries for the holidays. Even in this conversation, we've been talking about grief and death and having remembering with more joy than pain. We also want to have good boundaries. And so leaving our loved ones to the hands of God is putting up a really good boundary for our heart, our mind, but also for us who are living. We still, every day that we wake up is another opportunity, to live out our purpose, to live life to the fullest, to heal. And so being able to have boundaries around how we're going to use our time, who we're going to use it with, is going to be important in surviving the holidays as well. And this is not me advocating, well, everybody that makes you mad, stay away from them. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, think about how you can make sure that you are well
Mhm.
by how you use your time. So this could include, like, okay, what shows am I actually going to tap into? Am I going to watch things that are actually going to be detrimental to my mental health, that are, and each person has to individually decide, because even a show that could be seemingly not the best, maybe what that person needs to laugh and to lighten up.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
but you get to decide how you're going to boundary yourself with your
Boundaries.
time and what you're going to do in order to be the healthiest you possible.
I have to tell you about something. I've got a new friend. Just met him just the other day, but as we were talking and I was asking about his family and so forth, and he said something that I thought was very profound. It stuck with me. I thought, that's very wise. He said, he told me he has one brother in particular that he said, I'm closer to him than anyone else in the family. I asked him if he saw him very often, and um, he said, well, not that often, but when we do see each other, he said, we always just connect right away. And he said, we're in complete agreement about politics and religion and, named a couple of other things. And he said, and we get along really well for about 3 or 4 hours. And then we are just enough alike and maybe just enough different that we start to butt heads with each other.
Yeah.
So he said,
Mm.
so we don't
Keep it short.
we don't let our visits go past 3 or 4 hours.
Yep.
And I thought,
Crazy.
That is so
Perfect.
wise right
Perfect.
there. When
Perfect.
you recognize there's a pattern like that, that you can say to yourself, okay, then let's just not let ourselves get there.
Oh, that's so beautiful. What a perfect example, because what I hear is he's dosing, right? Like, I'm going to take this in doses that are healthy for me because I can overdose in this
Right,
setting, right?
right.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. And I hate to use the word overdose. That's probably too strong, but I think you get the point. Like the idea,
Right.
I'm measuring out the time and I know what's going to be good and I know it's not. And that's beautiful that your friend did that, because what I heard was that they weren't trying to change the brother and make
Right,
them more so that we can spend more time together. It was like, no, I just understand that these are our dynamics and I'm going to
right,
respect that. Hmm.
right.
I love it.
Wow.
I heard someone else say once, he said in his family, he said every time they got together, they spent the time watching TV together or watching a movie together. And I asked him why, and he said, because if we didn't have something else that we were all focused on, we fought.
Mm. Yeah.
Great.
So that was what they planned. They did want to get together. They did love each other, but their focus then when they got together was, let's do something that, we all can focus our attention on instead of focusing on each other because we don't want to fight.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I love it. I love it. And I mean, I hope that people will feel free to do that, even in relationships where they're expected to do otherwise. For some people, they're the Cinderella of the family, or they're the, I don't know, the Martha of the family, and so if in this season of life, that's not something you want to show up as,
Right.
some people may have a hard time with that. I'm just using those two examples because I know I've been that in different circles of my life. So you fill in the
Mhm.
blank name of what you might be, but if in this season of life you're that you feel like that's not going to be good for your heart, your mind, you're prayerfully thinking about how to um, grow your character, your personality,
Mm-hmm.
then you can know that as a boundary, I can decide that this year I'm not going to do the Cinderella thing. I'm not going to fall into that role. And that may ruffle some feathers because people are used to you showing up a certain way. But
Right.
one thing that may be helpful is finding out how to communicate the change that you're planning to make. And if that's not helpful, because some people, they have not their communication style doesn't match with yours, let's put it that way. Somebody might
Mhm.
say their communication maturity, I'm going to say their communication style may not match with yours. So if you tell them something they don't want to hear, maybe they only know how to yell and scream and accuse you and get mad and fault find, and that doesn't match with what you're trying to do.
Right.
So you may not be able to tell them, hey, I'm going to do something different this year. But what you could do is maybe instead of thinking, oh, I have to show up for Thanksgiving, I may show up before, right? And it's a little close to Thanksgiving now. So I don't know if this idea is coming too late. But if it's a local thing, like an idea I know someone had was, well, I can't tolerate the whole family together at the same time. So I'm going to go around them before the holiday and spend time and enjoy them and then let them know, hey, I'll be gone on the day, because that was going to help them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. And hopefully, your family
Mhm.
will understand
Understand.
and
Right.
encourage that rather than I think it would be really easy in some families to be, what? You're not going to be there for the holiday, but the whole family's supposed to be there. And what they're really upset about is that it messes up their concept of what
Yes.
the holiday is and feeling like, oh, well, I'm not going to have that anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which is internal, right? And that's something where we don't have to be responsible for other people's expectations and ideas and dreams. And they also are not responsible for ours. So
Right.
Right.
I don't have to feel like because my husband actually has to work that my Thanksgiving is ruined. I
Hmm.
don't have to go into that idea, like I could
Mhm.
think that way,
Hmm.
but I could also think, okay, hey, here's the opportunity for me to do something different,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love too that we can think of the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. Um, I remember early on in my life starting to think about, well, wait a minute, what would happen? Because I thought of Christmas was always these certain things. We did these certain things. We had these traditions. And that's part of what I look forward to. And then when I started realizing, oh, wait a minute, some of our family members are growing up and they're getting married and they're moving away and they're not going to be able to be here. Or they go
Mhm.
in the military and they're
Mhm.
deployed during the holidays. And I would think about that and I would think, oh, it's like skipping the holidays. It's like not having it. And I just couldn't even imagine that. And so, even as a middle school kid, I was thinking about these things and realizing, oh, wait a minute, what Christmas really is and what Thanksgiving really
Mhm.
is heart matter. It's what I do inside my heart. It's not what I do
Mhm.
on the outside. And that kind of opened up the possibilities for the holidays can look different every year. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter where I am. It doesn't matter who I'm with or if I'm not with somebody. It doesn't matter if, I don't keep certain traditions anymore. The
Mhm.
holiday is what I bring to it, not what I take away from it.
Which is
Mhm.
so beautiful. And I love that. I love that idea that, it's the holidays is what I bring to it. It's what I make it. And I know that can be really challenging for some people
Mhm.
because what the holiday may mean to them, what
Mhm.
meaning they've assigned to the holiday. This holiday and coming together means that there's love in our family. That
Mhm.
means that we accept each other or that we care for each other. So if we're not together, then it means the opposite. And
Mhm.
I just invite well, it's understandable that those feelings can be there, but I
Mhm.
invite people to reframe, right? A reframe, which is another tool that we can use for the holidays, which is what I heard you just do. You said, well, the holiday isn't this, it's what I make it. That's a reframe.
Right.
Absolutely.
Me, a quick question. If you had, and sometimes sadly, because I've had a few Charlie Brown Christmases myself, because being here in California, and my folks being in North Carolina, I have had times where I could not get home. And I mean, literally, I didn't want to bother people. I didn't want to, I just didn't feel like pressing myself into other parties and things like that. So I just said, I'm going to stay at home. I mean, I fixed a fantastic meal. I mean, really fantastic meal.
All right, guys.
And I just stayed home, watched TV. I didn't get into traffic. I didn't relax. No fuss, no muss. But for a person who might be alone and maybe they were an only child or something, what advice would you give a person, you know, during the holidays when they see everybody out and they're enjoying the Christmas lights and they're going and doing things? And sometimes people feel really alone because the holidays start to crush in on people. What advice would you give a person who may be alone? What type of things should they do
Man,
and
that's
to not
really
fall in a
good.
funk?
Oh
Uh-huh.
man, that's so good. I'm so glad you said that. So I think it really there's a couple of ways that we could go with that, right? So
Okay.
one, if you're a person who you don't have family around you and you don't want to be by yourself, you still have time to research and find out what's out there that you could become a part of actually.
Okay.
Because there are churches, there are community groups, there are people that have things that you might actually be able to be a part of, and if
Mhm.
you haven't been invited, you can create, right? It's
Okay.
totally your opportunity to decide, no one's invited me, and I can decide no one's invited me to a party. It's already almost November and I don't have an invitation. Well, I can create an invitation.
There you go.
A
For
lady,
yourself.
right. There was a lady and she had experienced divorce and she just had her little kids and
Mm.
she didn't have much money at all, and so she decided to get a bunch of stuff from the Dollar Tree and just invite random people from her job and say, hey, it's just me and my kiddos gonna be here. I'm a pretty good cook. If you don't have anywhere to go either, come to my house. And
Yeah.
on that holiday, her house was full of her delicious Dollar Tree food. And people were like, are we gonna do this again next year? And so she right there created a new tradition. And so that's one way that we could do it, right? We
Hmm.
could find out what's happening in our community. We could create a party ourselves and invite people to come to it. But if we're one of those loner type of people who also still feels alone, right? Because some people they're alone and they love it,
Hmm.
and some people they're alone and they're a loner, but they don't love it, right?
Yeah.
And
I can
then
take me. You're gonna love this.
okay.
I'm friends with Flavor Flav from Public Enemy.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
so Flav was in California it was Thanksgiving, and he was in town. Actually, he had moved out here, and me and him were tight. And I did that. I used to do a Thanksgiving dinner. I invited one of my other buddies who isn't married, another guy who's
Yeah.
divorced, his wife had passed,
Yeah.
and everybody were just like the misfit. It was just a bunch of guys, and we would cook because they loved the way I cooked, because I would
Right.
throw down a turkey. And so that year,
We need to
matter
go
of fact,
to California and visit him. He keeps talking
yeah.
about, well, I'm
And,
bringing my kids, my husband, we're coming.
and so I didn't tell my friends, and Flav, he'll remember this. He came to my apartment, and I didn't tell nobody that he was coming. And when he walked in, everybody about freaked. And he sat down, and we had the best Thanksgiving, and we laughed. All my core guys, my buddies, we just sat there and we just had a great time. But it was really, really that thing that you just mentioned about creating your own party. That's what I did, because that year I knew I couldn't get home. So I cooked, and every year, it was just it became a tradition. And so that was one of my fond memories. I enjoyed that.
Man, that's beautiful. That is so cool. It's so cool.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, does he still wear the big watches? And
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They call him King Swifty. He's actually like the head Taylor Swift, fan, super fan. So
Oh, that's
anyway, he's a great guy, funny guy, and just got a heart big as all outdoors. That's my boy.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's so awesome. I
Yeah.
mean, that's really great. And that's really what we're saying is that you can reframe. You can
There you go.
reframe your mindset. You can reframe what you want to experience for the holiday. It doesn't have
Woo.
to, like Nina said earlier, be what it's always been. That person who is lonely but doesn't want to be lonely and is also an introvert, right? They don't know how to just
Right.
pull a party together and do something. Um,
Hmm.
you may have a friend that can, right? That can
Uh-huh.
do it for you, right? You're not the person to
Mhm.
pull it off, but maybe you can hold the venue, right?
Right.
Or you can talk to those people in your life that are more extroverted that may be able to pull something off for you. And we can also not be afraid to be alone, right? Those are things that we can
Right.
explore. Like, hey, I'm by myself. Maybe nothing's working out. No one's coming over. And I've not been invited, but I'm here with me.
That's
And if
right.
I'm uncomfortable being with me, let's explore that. Here's an opportunity to have a me day where I
Mm.
can do some things that I really love and want and better get to know myself. I can do some self therapy tools. Which I have a therapy tool I want to share with you all if we have enough time. I think we
No,
might.
we do. We've got about 7
Okay.
minutes left, so go for it.
Okay, well okay, so everybody just take out your pencil and your pen. Okay, you can write this down. Okay, so this is a really good. So we've talked about brain detox for those who are interested in getting a free 21-day brain detox. You can go to our website painunwasted.org and see that. But this one is not on there. And this one is called Wiping the Slate. Okay, and it's
Mhm.
coming from a book called Finding the Gift in Depression by Changing Your Perspective. And this book is by Cornell Duplessis. She's actually one of my mentors who has trained me. She's an incredible person. And I teach the program that she created. And so you're taking your pencil and your pen and you're writing this down. Wiping the slate is kind of like doing the laundry of your mind, right? If you
Right.
don't do laundry, it builds up, then you don't have something to wear, right? And or if
Right.
you've washed the laundry but you haven't put it away, then you've got these piles sitting around that something needs to be done with them. Otherwise, after a while, it's like I can't find stuff. It's irritating. Okay. Wiping the slate is doing the laundry for your brain. So it first starts off with you identifying the thought. Okay. And usually when you need to do laundry, it's because something's not right. There's something that needs to be done. So you think about what is one thing that could be bothering you as you prepare to go into the holidays. What is there a thought that's been on your mind, in your head, that's bothering you about the holidays, right? For
Hmm.
instance, the thought could be me and my family, right? My family and I, we don't get along. So what you would do is you'd write that thought down. And then the next thing you would do is you would write out the situation, right? So you could put down what is the situation, or you could just put down situation colon. Okay. And
Mhm.
then you just kind of detail the situation. You can write for as long as you want or for as short, just a few words, right? We
Okay.
don't get along because we've never gotten along. Everybody always fights and everybody thinks the other person's not listening. And so when we get together, it's just a big mess, right? Or when we
Mhm.
get together, everybody expects me to just, do everything while they watch me work, right? Okay. So then
Mhm.
we write that down, situation. So then the next thing you ask is it true? Okay. So you're writing that down.
Mm.
Is it true? And in this spot, you can only write yes or no. Okay. Yes or
Wow.
no. So you can't be like, well, it's kind of, or no, just yes or no. And then the next line, does Jesus believe it's true? So this is for the believer, right? Those who,
Mm.
identify with Christ. Does Jesus believe it's true? And that question is really interesting because sometimes I believe something, but then when I think, does Jesus believe this? My answer might change, right? But we're just writing it down. Does Jesus believe it's true? Yes or no? And so then the next thing we do is I want you to write down think, feel, act, have. And I'm writing it with you so I can have the right amount of time in explaining how to do it because you're writing it, right? And just so you know, it's good to write because we could easily put the link up, but writing is one of the fastest ways to tell your brain I'm doing something about what's bothering me also. So while it's nice to
Mm.
have a printout, writing is beautiful for your brain, okay? So
Mhm.
here we go. Think, feel, act, have, okay? So the question that this exercise is asking you, when you're thinking the thought, whatever your thought is, I'm just going to say, me and my family don't get along. What other thoughts are coming to your mind? So in the think part, you would put, I'm thinking they don't like me, they don't respect me, they want me to spend all my time with them and not get to know other people, right? Think.
Mhm.
Well, when you're thinking thoughts like that, how are you feeling? I feel angry. I feel frustrated. I feel tired. I'm irritated, right?
Mhm.
And now, how have you been acting with that thought in place, right? So the thought was, my family and I don't get along, or my family and I don't get along, and I don't want to see them for Christmas, right? So how have I been acting? Because that thought's in my head and it's impacting me. So maybe I started eating more donuts because I'm getting stressed already in October about December.
Mm.
Or maybe I've stopped taking the calls of my family, because I'm anticipating this
The holidays.
issue in the future. Or maybe I am binge watching TV. I don't know. There's different things people do to deal with their internal stress that they may not be aware of. And then lastly, have has to do with um, what experience have you been having while that thought has been in your mind? Well, I've been more sad, or I've been more anxious. I've been more clingy to my friends that I have in my circle, different things like that.
Mm.
These are just examples, right? But you would take the time to just kind of think about, what other thoughts are in my mind? How have I been feeling since I've been thinking like that? Man, is there any way I've been acting that I didn't even realize was connected to this thought? Boy, I noticed I have been doing this, right? You see how that works?
Mhm.
Okay,
Mm.
we're almost done. So the next part is we put, how do you believe Jesus sees your situation? How do you believe Jesus sees your situation? And this one's important. If you come up with the answer that is not bathed in empathy, grace, and understanding, then that could be an indication that you you may see God in a very negative light. And we don't have time to talk about it now, but there's a Baylor study that talks about how America has four gods, and it's a whole nother show, right?
Right.
But in any case, I invite anyone doing this laundry exercise for their mind to, when you consider how Jesus might see your situation, shun any thoughts that Jesus is thinking you're being too sensitive, or you're being petty, or you're not being Christ-like, you need to grow up. You know, when we think that God sees
Mm.
us that way,
Hmm.
that may be an indication of something else, right? Okay,
Yeah.
but consider that God understands why you feel the way that you do, and that God wants to help you with how you're feeling, because that's hopeful, right? Hope
Right.
is helpful. Okay.
Right.
And then next, we want to do a opposite thought. Okay. And I'll just have to wrap this up because I know we're out of time. But basically, you do an opposite thought. So if um, the thought was, I don't want to be around my family for the holidays. I'm not going to have a good time, whatever that was. The exact opposite thought of that is, I do want to be with my family during the holidays. We're going to have a good time. And while you don't necessarily believe that, writing the opposite just kind of opens up your mind to a new possibility. You're not brainwashing yourself. You're just opening up your mind to a new possibility. So then you would also write down, how do you believe the other person sees the situation? Or how do you think someone else might see this situation? And so actually taking the time to do that, and this seems like work, right? But laundry is work, right? You got to put all the stuff in there so it'll get cleaned, and do it for the right setting, all that. Okay, so after that, the last thing you want to do is a replacement thought, which a replacement thought, another thought for that is basically a reframe, right? We
Mhm.
are going to reframe the thought that we originally had. I don't want to be around my family for the holidays. They think I'm their slave. So, so maybe the reframe will be, I will learn how to be around my family in a new way.
Very good.
Or I will I I will learn how to have a holiday that is not what I'm used to with my family. Which doesn't mean you won't be with your family, but it's something different that you're using to reframe your mind. So now, as you begin to think about the holidays and what's coming up, you have that reframe in place that you can continue to just kind of recite, instead of the holidays are going to be terrible, it's going to be awful, how will I make it? It's, I'm going to learn how to celebrate in a new way this year. I'm going to show up differently. These are all reframes. But doing this work really helps you to see why you may have been engaging in other behaviors. It gives your brain an opportunity to calm down some of the inflammation that may be coming from negative toxic thoughts, and to even look at yourself and see how you could be engaging in thought processes that are not helpful to you. They're jumping to conclusions, they're mind reading, they're cognitive distortions that aren't serving you, basically.
Mhm.
So anyway, that was kind of long. Hopefully that made sense
That's
to,
wonderful.
but it really works, and it's something you can even do with your friends. Like, as a good friend, you can take them through these questions.
Mhm.
They come to you and they're struggling and they're like, I'm so frustrated. Okay, let's do this exercise I learned on This Way Network. Let's do
Yeah,
it. You know?
I love this. And I wrote all that down. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for that.
it really
I
works.
know we're out of time, and I hate to cut it off, um, and only because we're out of time. Mia, will you come back so we can talk about this some more?
Let's do it.
And it would be a great idea to actually spend a whole show to take us through this tool.
We
And
could. We could
hopefully,
come up
and
with a
hope,
situation and walk somebody through it. We sure
and
could.
hopefully, and hopefully, we can have some examples of how people applied what they just learned today to their holidays. And if hopefully everybody, if you could kind of glean some real knowledge from this and put some of these into action, hopefully we could have a follow-up show and say, hey, how did you survive the holidays?
Do we have like 10 seconds for me to just read off the steps really quick? Not what I just did. It's just, so remember, so the steps were remember with more joy than pain, right? We can keep our attachment. However, we can also accept loss. Okay. Algae, and that was talked about. So go back and look at that. Algae is how we can help someone that may be struggling. Remembering to connect to a companion, right? Let's remember our boundaries, that we can set boundaries for our time, for ourselves. Let's practice reframing, which is what that last tool was that we just gave. So there we go.
There it is. Well, Mia Pyle, Pain Unwasted, thank you again for being on with us, Mia. We really appreciate that.
We really do. Yeah, this has been fantastic and very timely.
Good.
Y'all, thank you so much for joining us on the This Way Network today. And we're looking forward to having Mia back, and we hope you'll come back too. Y'all have a great day and be of good courage, because God is with us and we aren't alone.
Take care. Bye-bye.